In the heart of 18th century Lancashire, where church bells rang over cobbled streets and the soot of industry hung heavy in the air, a young boy named Daniel Sixsmith was baptised in Prescott in 1787. The town, once a rural settlement, was now waking to the rhythms of the Industrial Revolution. Known for toolmaking and watchmaking, Prescott sat just east of Liverpool, surrounded by collieries, canals and change. Daniel was the son of Daniel and Anne Sixsmith, and by 1808 he had married Esther Bolton at St Luke's Church in Farnworth, Widnes, a few miles short from Prescott. The marriage record tells of a quiet story. Daniel signs his name confidently. Esther leaves a simple X, the mark of many women of her time who never learned to write. They have a child together, Daniel, who was baptised on Christmas Day 1813 back in Prescott. Just 4 years later, in 1817, Daniel Sr. died, leaving behind a young family. Daniel Sixsmith, born into loss, would grow up in a world reshaped by machines, mines, and manual craft. By the time of the 1841 census, England had begun to count its people systematically. This first census recorded names, occupations, ages, and relationships, though minimal by today's standards. We find Daniel, aged 25, living at Lane's End in Prescott with his mother Esther, her new husband Joseph Graham, and his brother John. Lane's End is to the north of Prescott, and the family lived next door to the pub Sign of the Angel, an establishment they would have no doubt frequented. Both young men are watchmakers, skilled tradesmen in a town once renowned for its timepieces. In the 1800s, Prescott was a renowned centre for watchmaking, with many skilled artisans producing watch parts and movements for larger manufacturers in cities like Liverpool and London. Most watchmakers worked from small workshops attached to their homes or in shared workspaces where large windows were essential to let in natural light for the intricate, detailed work required in crafting timepieces. In 1844, Daniel marries Sarah Evans, listing himself once again as a watchmaker. The marriage record reveals an interesting note. Daniel lists his late father's occupation as a plumber, though records over the years have also called him an engineer, suggesting he was likely a man of practical mechanics, perhaps skilled in both metalwork and water systems, as industries often overlapped. In 1846, their son William was born, but a year later, tragedy returned. Daniel died in 1847, aged just 34, from disease of the glands of the bowels and exhaustion. His stepfather Joseph Graham was by his side in his final hours at their house in Lane's End. William Sixsmith, born in 1846, entered life just as his father's ended. Raised in Saint Helens, William's childhood was shaped by a new stepfather, Daniel Halsall, and a large blended family. The 1851 census finds him at Bridge Street with an older brother Roger and younger half-sister Catherine. Through the 1860s, the family moved to Welsh Row, and by 1871 they were living at Tow Row with Esther Evans, William's grandmother. In 1875, William married Elizabeth Jones in Prescott. His brother Roger signed as a witness, a touching link between generations. By 1881, William had followed the region's dominant trade, coal mining. At 25 Welsh Row, he lived with Elizabeth and their 3 children. Over the next 20 years, the Sixsmith household swelled. By 1901, they were at 54 Fenton Street, with 7 children living with them, and William's ageing stepfather, Daniel. William's role had become that of a hewer, one of the most dangerous and gruelling jobs in the pit. Hewers worked at the coalface, hacking coal from rock with pick and shovel. The work demanded immense strength, stamina and grit, often done in cramped, suffocating darkness. Accidents were frequent, injuries were common. By 1911, the English census had evolved. Households now filled out their own forms in their own handwriting, revealing not only the names and jobs, but how long couples had been married, how many children were born alive, and how many had sadly passed away. William, now 65, was still working as a coal hewer, living at 524 Sutton Heath Road, with Elizabeth and 5 of their children. The census reveals a painful truth. They had 12 children, but only 9 survived. In the 1921 census, William is now a retired coal miner, having worked at Lee Green Colliery in Saint Helens. He's living with his wife and 2 sons, William and Edward. Their son, Daniel Sixsmith, born 16th of July 1880, would follow in his father's footsteps and boots. By the 1981 census, Daniel was a scholar at St Anne's Boys' School in Saint Helens, but by 21 years old he was already a coal hewer still living with his parents. In 1917, at the age of 37, Daniel married Jessica Mills. Recently widowed, had lived just streets away from Daniel most of her life. Their paths, so closely wound, finally met in marriage. Both signed their names on the certificate, a moment of quiet equality in their partnership. The following year, Daniel's uncle, Roger Sixsmith, joined the Royal Navy, serving in World War I, under registration number 117941. He stood at 5'8", with brown hair, grey eyes, and a scar on his left buttock. Human details pulled from the military records that made him more than just a name. 27th of November 1920, Daniel and Jessie welcomed their son, also Daniel, into the world at 536 Sutton Heath Road. The Sixsmith family story is deeply rooted in Sutton Heath Road, where generations lived side by side for at least half a century. From 1911 through until at least 1957, their homes stretched along the same familiar street, from 524, 526, 528, 336 and 538 Sutton Heath Road to nearby 314 Elephant Lane. This close-knit cluster of addresses reflects more than where they lived. It tells the story of a family that stayed connected, supported one another, and built their lives within the same community. Sutton Heath wasn't just their address, it was the heart of their family history. In 1925, a near-fatal accident would mark the family's history. A newspaper reported a freak incident at Jockey's Brow, a clay pit 100 feet deep. A horse-drawn trap carrying Daniel and his 2 sons, Herbert Baybutt, aged 16, and young Daniel Smith, aged 4, took fright when a goat capered nearby. The horse reared, broke through the fencing, and plunged into the pit. In a moment of heroic instinct, Herbert shouted, "Jump, Daddy, before we go over." Daniel clung to the reins, cradled his youngest under one arm, and threw him up on the bank. The boy caught hold of a ledge, then fell 20 feet, grasping a projecting stone, holding on for dear life. All 3 survived, bruised, shaken, but alive. The horse sadly did not. William and Elizabeth Sixsmith shared a long life together, married for 52 years. They raised 12 children, building a strong and enduring family legacy. William passed away in 1927, and Elizabeth followed just 8 years later, in 1935. Their journey together was marked by devotion, resilience, and a deep family bond that lives on through their descendants. By 1939, Daniel was living at 314 Elephant Lane in his brother Roger's household. His son, Daniel Jr., also lived there. Sadly, Jessica had passed away in 1935, just 50 years old. leaving Daniel a widower. Daniel Jr., who had been 4 at the time of the accident in the clay pit, is now 19 years old and is working in non-ferrous metal rolling. Daniel Sr. lived for another 22 years after Jessica's death, passing away in 1957 at the age of 76. His tragic death was the result of a collision with a cyclist near his home on Sutton Heath Road, and it was reported in the local newspaper. An inquest confirmed he died from brain injuries caused by the accident. From the watchmakers of Prescott to the hewers of Saint Helens, to those who escaped death at the edge of a clay pit, the Sixsmith family story is one of resilience, skill, and enduring love. It is a story of men and women who survived the mines, built homes from hardship, and left behind not just names on a census record, but a living, breathing legacy. This is their story. The Sixsmith family, a name forged in time, tempered in coal, and carried through generations.